Welcome back to ET with GOTB. Chelsea and City faced each other this week. Again. Twice. And plenty of other Champions League and WSL action to get through. So let's get into it. I'm Rachel.
I'm Sophie.
And this is Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. Are you with us, Sophie? Are you with us? It's like
I'm really not with you.
Your one job in the beginning of the episode.
I've got my cue there.
What is my name? Welcome back to the latest episode of Extra Time with GOTB. Loads going on, loads of competitions. How many games did you do in 10 days? 10.
Yeah.
10 games in 10 days. She wrote 9. Made it even worse. She put up on social media that we did 9 and we did bloody 10. Anyway.
I'm rubbish at maths.
That's true. We have got loads to run through in this week's episode. Before we get going, this is your weekly reminder to subscribe wherever you listen or wherever you're watching your podcasts, so that you do not miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you as well. If you'd like to drop us a comment, leave us a review, that'd be very nice. And do follow us across our socials. We're at Girls on the Ball on everything, pretty much. Right, we've got loads coming up in this episode. What a week of football we've had. We're both knackered, hence Sophie forgetting her own bleeding name. But hopefully she'll have a bit more about her for the rest of the episode if we're lucky.
I'm also going to be impressed by your editing skills, I think. Rachel just took me out on a run. And I'm slightly tomato-like, so you're going to have to take the red out of my face.
We could just pretend you're a little bit embarrassed. I put some concealer on, so hopefully I'll look less red next to you.
I don't look red anyway.
This time last week, we did our episode. We were halfway through the crazy kind of 10 days. We were recording from a hotel room in Madrid. We've had some Champions League action. We've had Man City versus...
Doesn't that feel like a year ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We've had Man City versus Chelsea again and again. And we've had some fight backs in the league as well, which we definitely need to get into. We will do all of that. We'll check out how the championship is going as well. And then we'll look ahead to the next batch of Champions League action, because it just doesn't bloody stop. As ever, hopefully, you will pick out a player this week. Yeah, okay, you're looking a bit more confident about it. You'll then shine a spotlight on a moment of magic, a goal, a tactic, a tweak, something along those lines that impressed you, and then you will talk us through your team of the week. Does that sound good?
Yes.
You actually have a team of the week.
We also have some breaking news.
Okay. Oh, wow. We do have some breaking news. Okay, we'll get to that. Can you remind me in our any other business section? Thanks.
If anyone saw me looking a bit eyebrow raisy in the last 2 minutes, it's because I was reading this breaking news.
Is it really a surprise? I don't know. Okay, let's start with the Barclays WSL. So we're kind of going a bit backwards to go forwards, but it's the best way to do it, I think. Everton 3, Crystal Palace 0. Van Havermaet, Sarah Holmgaard and Gago with the goals. Arsenal 4, Liverpool 0. Ford, Jazz Matthews at 2 own goals, and Caldente scoring. West Ham 2, Spurs 0. Ribrink with an own goal and SAE with the second. Man City 1, Chelsea 2. Carolyn, Aggie Weaver-Jones and Erin Cuthbert with the goals there. Leicester 3, Brighton 2. O'Brien, Takarada, Shosanat, Haley and Kirby scoring all of the goals in that one. Aston Villa 0, Manchester United 4, Turland with 2, Clinton and Galton getting on the score sheet. Got a bit of a week of OGs, isn't it? And not the good kind. You did some of these exciting ones. You did Everton Palace and you did Leicester versus Brighton.
Yes.
They were good. I did West Ham Spurs. Managed to watch a good chunk of your game, the Arsenal game. We then did the Man City game, and then I will say I did fall asleep through a bit of the Aston Villa Manchester United game. But I feel like I've pretty much touched on everything this week somehow. Okay, let's start with your game. Everton 3, Palace 0. Maybe not a surprise result because of the way Everton have been going so far in 2025?
No, I think it was going to be interesting. It felt interesting before the game because Everton are like this resurgent team at the moment since the turn of the year, with the money, with Brian Sorensen finally having, depth to choose from, and they're a bit of a chameleon team. They can actually really possess the ball really well, but then when they're playing maybe top 4 opposition, they can really defend quite well and be quite compact. So they've been performing really well. And then Palace came into this one on the back of that big win against Aston Villa. So while Everton were probably the favourites, you did feel Palace could maybe trouble them because of that kind of resurgent, kind of buoyant hope that they've got confidence that they've got maybe going into the final sector of the season.
But arguably a tough ask for them to win back-to-back on the bounce.
Definitely, and away from home, it was the first away game under Leif in the league. I know they played Chelsea away, but I mean, that's just across London. It's not quite the journey up to Liverpool and all of that. I thought Palace did well in the first half. They didn't have as much the ball. but everything was a bit poor quality for both sides in the final third. Everton weren't creating all that much. They scored with their first opportunity of the game in the 43rd minute, and that was kind of the worst possible time for Palace to concede.
It's a theme, isn't it? It's a theme, either right before half-time or right after half-time.
Well, if you look at this
or
game,
just before full-time.
Well, if you look at this game, they conceded in the 43rd, the 46th minute, and then the 91st minute.
That's Palace all over this season.
And it is just that kind of mental side of the game, that experienced side of the game, where they can't quite keep their heads in the game for a full 45 minutes till they get to the break. But yeah, Palace did pretty well in that first half. They caused a few dangerous opportunities for Courtney Brosnan.
They do always look dangerous on the break, don't they?
The transition is really good. I think Clarissa Lurisse did really well, breaking through the lines. And yeah, they are light in numbers, though. And I think in the second half, once you concede within 1 minute of the restart, then you've got all sorts of problems coming away because you've suddenly got a mountain to climb. And you've had to readjust before you can even get yourself settled again. So I think they'll take a lot of positives from it in a way. But stuff to work on, and they've got a really big game. I know they've got Arsenal next, but they're at home in front of their home fans. They've got nothing to lose in that one in terms of like they won't be expected to win it. They'll be the underdog. So kind of a free hit for them, I think, in terms of this like the next few weeks. It's the one where they can afford to just sort of be a bit free with it.
Yeah. Everton are now in 7th on 19 points. They're just 3 behind Brighton in 5th. And Brian said, what did he say? They were hunting.
Hunting season. It's hunting season. Got a laugh from all of us in the press room. I think they are now looking up rather than down. They've got that safety net, I think, from the bottom. Yes, mathematically, it's still possible for them to go down, but they're not going to go down with the kind of advantage that they have and how they're looking at the moment. And I think he'll be looking at that pile of them above them, Liverpool, Tottenham are now below them, but Liverpool and Brighton, both who fell this weekend. So he'll be looking at that as very much things, clubs that they can hunt down.
Now, this last point, do you want to talk about it now, or did you want to talk about it later in the episode?
I'll mention it later, but I can talk about it now.
Okay, so Sophie, you were floor manager this weekend, and you thought pretty much like the action was done once the full-time whistle had gone and you could focus on your questions for the managers post-match, but it wasn't that simple.
No, I was. There was a lot of frantic messaging going on. Maybe about 5 minutes to go, and at the end of the game, I was told that Rika Madsen's boyfriend Martin was going to propose, and the plan was, and they were trying to organise it all. So I was like desperately onto sending messages to the camera crew that I was in touch with, and the kind of production team saying, stay on the huddle after the game, because something's going to happen. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but something's going to happen. And thankfully, they stayed on the huddle. They managed to roll through the highlights reel and stay on the huddle to get the moment of him getting down on one knee. It was very cute. They brought the new baby onto the pitch.
So cute.
What, 4 months old?
Yeah, she gave birth in October.
Yeah, so it was her first game back, her first appearance back, and it kind of, I think, needed everything to align in place. So they needed to win the game. They needed to get Rika onto the pitch.
Yes.
So to be able to be comfortable enough to get her onto the pitch for her first appearance back. And then it was down to Martin to get the job done. She said yes. I have never done a post-proposal interview before, so that was a new one to tick off the book. But yeah, very, very happy scenes, and
congratulations.
I don't think any of her teammates were expecting it.
They didn't.
They were like, the look of surprise and joy on their faces was really cute.
I heard from some of them they weren't. They didn't know that was happening.
My other highlight of that game was I interviewed Justine Van Havermaet as well, and I asked her about her goal, and because obviously it was a header, and she was like, yes, it was really good, like, to meet the ball. I don't have to jump very high. No, I almost cracked up halfway through the interview, but I didn't. Held it together very professionally.
Well done. Well, an action-packed game for you to cover. The same evening, we had Arsenal facing Liverpool. Arsenal winning 4-0. We will get on to their midweek performance, but I feel like it was a much-needed performance ahead of the second leg against Real Madrid. Back at the Emirates, especially having played Liverpool and being beaten in the FA Cup, it was a much-needed boost to confidence. I thought they played very well, as we expected. Quick play, quick passing, getting the ball forward quickly. I think we both thought the midfield section was quite interesting in terms of who they picked, given Liverpool's dominance in that area.
Yeah.
But it seemed to work. Liverpool really struggled to kind of stop the ball getting through Kim Little.
So Kim was in the 6 and Mariona was playing in the 8, so maybe a bit deeper than she would normally be. But she performed really, really well there, and her work rate is really intense. And trying to remember the stat, but she's been involved in like 21 goal creation opportunities or something along those lines, in the 20s anyway. So like she's got huge stats in terms of what she does in the attacking zone for Arsenal. But I think what she does defensively, in the way that her energy and her work rate really covers them defensively as well, whether she's playing in the centre or out on the left.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a really good, intense performance from Arsenal. Caitlin Ford was on one from the first whistle. They were pressing Liverpool high. Liverpool made the really silly mistake of, once they conceded, they basically played themselves into trouble straight away. And you actually just have to be a bit more grown up about it, a bit more mature, and realise that you can't do those little passes out from the back, or try and hold it on for it too long in midfield. At some points in the game, you have to just manage the game a little bit better
and
try and get the control back 5 minutes after you concede, because what they conceded 2
85 seconds, I think.
Something like that, which just shows that kind of lack of maturity, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think Arsenal, it's really interesting, because I think Arsenal get a lot of criticism, and in some way it's deserved. I mean, the cup loss to Liverpool was poor, and the defeat in the cup to City, it was poor. They played better second half, but I think because it was semi-finals of the cups for both ones, the criticism is heavier. Whereas actually
quarterfinals for the Liverpool,
but when in the league, I think you can really see how different they are under Renee. I think they really have come on leaps and bounds. Jonas' team wouldn't have beaten Liverpool 4-0, and they wouldn't have beaten other teams that sit with a compact block 4-0. And yes, they fell down in the cup, but the fact that, I think it was a stat, right, in they've become the first team in WSL history to score 4 goals or more in 6 consecutive home games. And I think that's just kind of shows the attacking strength that they're developing under Renee. And it's going to have its bumps along the way, and there's going to be hiccups, but it's going in the right direction. And then also, when I was looking at the table, they've scored 2 less goals than Chelsea this season, and conceded 2 more than Chelsea. And yet there's 8 points between them. I mean, that's not like big difference in terms of numbers. It's obviously the way that football goes, but they are scoring, like they're they're scoring the second highest in the league by quite some margin. The next one is Manchester City at 38. And then they're conceding the third meanest defence in the league, which, for all of the discourse around Arsenal, I think is really impressive to see where they've come now. They're sitting second from when they were that horrible week back in October and Jonas left. I think there is a difference.
I think Arsenal's season is being looked at in the now without the context of what's happened. And I think if they were playing like this and they hadn't had the start that they'd had, the narrative would be slightly different. I also think what probably frustrates fans a little bit is that the consistency in performance level can be quite different. So there can be some games where you're just like, how is this not going right? I don't understand, and I imagine it'd be quite frustrating for fans to be like, how can we play like that? Just narrowly losing, say, to a Chelsea, playing a really good game of football there against Liverpool, and then you look at them, say, against Real Madrid, and be like, it's 2 different teams.
It is frustrating, and I'm not saying don't criticise the Liverpool defeat. Within its own right, it should be criticised. It was a bad performance. There were bad decisions made on the sideline. The energy wasn't there, and within that game itself, there was plenty of criticism to have. But I think when you're looking at the wider context of the season, to see where they are now to where they were back at the start,
you need to remember their start.
And I think that kind of progress is still there. And I think you can only really judge Renee properly after she has had a summer window and a pre-season. And if next year they're in the same position and they're getting knocked out of competitions left, right and centre, and they've fallen behind in the league for whatever reason, then you can start to have real, on her
managerial
tenure as manager, that's when you can really start to criticise her, because I think at the moment you're going to have bumps along the way. And that's explainable for the Liverpool games. And that's, as I said, not a reason not to criticise, but not when you look at it as a whole.
Context is important.
We
say that a lot about a lot of where teams are in the league, results, I think that's why it's important to interrogate a little bit more than just kind of skim over things.
And it's not to say that they can't improve. They've got so much to improve on.
100%.
Of course, they're not perfect, but I do think that they are probably the second best team in the league at the moment, and that's showing by the stats at the moment.
Okay, we're going to move on to West Ham Spurs, which is a game I chose to do. I'm quite glad I chose to do. My mom was visiting, and I didn't know which game to do on Sunday. I chose not to do one on Saturday, so I could spend time with her. But I ended up kind of thinking, West Ham's kind of the only London one. I'll do that, and then I can get home for the Manchester one. This game always kind of delivers, and I did worry a little bit that when I said that pre-match that it was going to end up being a 0-0 draw. It felt at times high intensity, like a little bit transitional at times. Sometimes as a photographer, you get bursts of action and then you can breathe. And there were moments in that game where there was so much bloody action in and around the box. You kind of felt a bit like you're going back and forth. And then after about maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes, you're like, okay, geez, did I actually get any of that? Do you know that kind of way? It just felt like that kind of game where you kind of have to be on high alert at times, which made it feel quite, high intensity. I think West Ham are really starting to find a rhythm under Rianne. I think they've needed time. We've said this before with Rianne Skinner that, needed a bit of time with a team that she's chosen, with players that have come in that are starting to understand each other. That was their first time winning 5 home games in a season. So that's going to give them a huge boost. They leapfrogged Spurs as well. So they're into 8th now, I believe. And they're just playing some really nice football. Pavi looks so dangerous. Martinez is an absolute pest in the box. You could just tell she irritates defenders. She's on it all the time. Her pressing is really good. Katrina Gorey had a great game. Hanshaw I thought was good. I know she was the result of the first goal, right? And she was getting up the pitch really, really well. I also thought Ella Morris for Spurs had a great game. She was creating a lot of opportunities up the wing, but it just didn't feel like the right people were in the right place at the right time. And I feel that Spurs are a different side without Bethany England in them. Just up or in and around the box, they're too passive. And they might get a ball or they might get a touch, but their actual finish and ability to kind of create something that of good value, they're really struggling if Bethany England isn't there, which I think is a problem.
Yeah, I think it's been a season of real progress for West Ham. And I always thought that the accusations levelled at them in some quarters of them having little identity or not really knowing what they're about. I think you've always seen the style of play that Rianne Skinner wants to play. It's just that she didn't have the personnel or the bodies to kind of do it. And I think over the last couple of windows, she's really built up this unit of a squad. Got some really exciting players, had to be clever in terms of the recruitment, look places that other people haven't been looking. The get of Shakira Martinez to get her, have to send her out alone immediately to try and get those points so that she could come and work in England. Really, really helped her because she came back in January in flying form, having done really well in Germany. And then when you're looking at the kind of intense style of the press that they want to play, the way that they go forward, yes, there's going to be mistakes, and they're a young team in terms of developing their kind of history in the game in terms of the WSL. And it's taken a couple of seasons for Skinner to get that together. But you're starting to see a real identity, and I think another one who's taught not nearly as much about as she should be is Rika Ueke.
Yeah,
absolutely superb centre forward. You think she's just going to be the technical player that she is, but she has so much awareness and vision, and she's got some real aerial ability as well. And she's really tough, strong, physical, and she's that kind of ideal focal point at the top of their attack. And then when you blend that with Shakira Martinez and Vivian Asai, it's a really, really good front three. Yeah. And then you add in Eversoft and Serena Puibel or other, they've got other attackers as well that can come off the bench, and Pavi.
Yeah.
And you're starting to have real options, not just in your starting 11, but on both sides.
And that was often the case with, I think, teams in the middle of the table, was that, yes, it was about depth, but it was also about quality and depth. And that at times you'd have a Chelsea or an Arsenal or a Manchester United who could make substitutes, and you just think, Jesus, they're bringing them off the bench. And that maybe wasn't necessarily the case with some of the teams in the middle of the table. And you might find that the form or the style would dip slightly once substitutions are made. But I feel like we're not seeing that as much now across the league, as that substitutions are made, the levels are sustained because players are A, better in quality, I would say, and B, have a much better understanding of their identity, that when you bring on a new player, they know exactly what their job is. So we're seeing that.
And I think the other thing I say is central midfield is really interesting. Katrina Gorey mixed with Una Sarin.
Una Sarin was brilliant.
Like those two, like proper little terriers right in the middle. They go after everything. The press is ridiculous. They're tenacious. They're not afraid to tackle. And the two of them paired together is just like a real unit for West Ham. And it's really like the foundations for which they can build that, win the turnover, win the ball back, and then send your pacey forwards running.
I noticed something yesterday there, that with players who wear their socks real low, there's a terrierness about them. You know, they're like a little terrier that just go after absolutely everything, snapping at your heels, do not let things go. I've actually started to notice that there's a bit of a thing across players generally who wear their socks down real low. You think about it. You think about a few players now who do that, and you'll realise
Jack Grealish
that they're that start. Maya Letizia is another one. Like there's quite a few of them that will have them down real low, and they're just like snapping at you. Like you cannot get away from them.
Is that how you decide what kind of player someone is?
Yeah. I think it's absolutely legit. I do think it's a bit of a worry for Spurs in terms of identity. I think they're struggling a little bit. I think they're maybe struggling to play the type of football Robert wants them to play. But I also think when I think of the Spurs that set up against Manchester City a couple of weeks ago versus how they were against Brighton and how they were now, you know, I kind of thought that Man City game was a turning point for them. But it also proves how they can play.
But they're so different without Beth England at the helm.
And it's annoying because you're like, oh, Sumanen's back, brilliant. Drew Spence, brilliant. And now they've lost Bethany England. And it's like, you need all the pieces.
She is that focal point of their attack. And I think that's why it was so confusing earlier in the season when she was being moved around a bit, because when she is the number 9, she adds a different dimension to them and they don't look as toothless, going forward. And you always know that she just needs one opportunity to score. So I think that's a big problem.
It's also not just what she does on the ball, but what she does within the team and the confidence she gives the team and the leadership. And you just feel like she pulls them through at times, or she gets them focused at times. And yeah, hopefully she'll be back soon for them. Okay, Manchester City versus Chelsea, part 3. So we're doing part 3 first, if that's okay, instead of part 2. This was a literal game of two halves in terms of, I thought Chelsea initially started well, but I thought City completely took control of the first half. Carolyn, she had a superb game midweek. She carried it on again this week. I thought she was excellent. She could have had 2 or 3 chances. And from watching that first half, I thought City were going to go on and win it. Then, second half, totally different. Chelsea came out, much more intensity from them going forward. They could have scored a handful of goals if not for Chiara Keating. And it felt like at times City were very much like on the ropes, weathering the storm, hanging on, and were doing very well to hang on. But I did feel that goal from Chelsea was coming. They were playing with this the way we've seen them play in the past. It was the same with that Everton game. When I think back, it was coming. You knew it was coming. And I don't know, it wasn't a huge surprise. It was a great goal, a typical Aaron Cuthbert goal. But I just found it really interesting from their midweek performance where, they are dealing with injuries, as we know. There's a bit of a worry now that Alexandri and who else went off? Hasegawa with knocks that Nick Cushing said they couldn't continue it. So really hoping they're back in time, because I'm not sure City can take much more in terms of managing the injuries. But I do think the youngsters playing in the back line who've come in have performed really well. And I'm impressed with City in terms of how they're able to manage these injuries in these last few games, and they've been willing to change things.
I am, and I'm not. Well, I am. In terms of the personnel that's on the field, they're doing a really good job in the fact that they've managed to stay in these games and really, really compete with Chelsea. Like, I know they've lost 2 of the 3 games, but they've been very close to them and very in them. And there have been moments where they could have got more goals, could have turned the games on their head. And it's not been like Chelsea have run all over them at all. I think it does just show, though, that the problems that they're having, Chelsea have had significant injury problems across the season, across the last 18 months, but they have built a squad for these moments, and they've built the depth in that squad for these moments. And that is where Manchester City have fallen down, is that they haven't built a squad really to go deep into competitions, I don't think. They have the players, they have quality, don't get me wrong, they have hugely quality players, but beyond the first 14, 15 players, you don't have that level. Yes, you have youngsters coming in who are performing really well, But if you're thinking about getting to a Champions League final or a Champions League semi-final, which they might do, but I'm just saying, if you're thinking
it's a different attitude.
Of fighting on all four fronts, you need a deeper squad. I think that's where they've fallen down in kind of the off seasons. They haven't recruited well enough, or nearly, not even well enough. They haven't recruited nearly enough players.
I think from what we've heard previously from Gareth Taylor, it felt like they'll recruit them when they get there rather than recruiting them to get there. And I think that's two different types of attitudes from the two clubs. I think Chelsea have recruited to win the Champions League. It's easy when, not easy, but when you're winning the league and you know you've got your spot every year, it's slightly different. But I do think a bit chicken and egg. Do you recruit to get there, or do you get there and then start? You need to recruit to get there, I think, in this game. And I think maybe that's where it's hitting Man City harder, is that they're doing well and going deep into these competitions, and suddenly they're like, shit, we actually, and they have the injuries to do it.
But when they lose Bunny Shaw and they lose Firmino, and potentially, well, I don't even know what happens if they lose Hasegawa, they lose Alexandri. I mean, hopefully they could both come back. You're now without Yamashita. You're using your number 2 goalkeeper, who performed brilliantly.
Excellent, yeah.
Kiara Keating performed brilliantly, but she is their number 2 at the moment. They're starting to look really, really. They don't have Lauren Hem. They're starting to look really, really thin on the ground. No Laura Blinkilde-Brown either. She's in a boot. I just think it's a worry and something that you do have to, as a backroom, prepare for. And I think it's, other than Chelsea, no other squad is doing it. You know, preparing for these moments where you might have an injury crisis, and you can't. And like, you look at Chelsea, you know, Lucy Bronze was playing centre back yesterday. They
made a lot of changes, 6 changes, I think.
Yeah, and they have issues in their, like, in terms of numbers in their centre back area, with Germa being out and Natalie Bjorn needing a rest and all of that stuff.
The injury.
Yeah. They do have their issues, but they have someone in Lucy Bronze who has played. I know she is a right back by trade, but she has played centre back. She spent basically a whole season at centre back for England 1 year, back in like 2014 or something. She can do the job, so they have that kind of alternative. And when you finish the game with Viv Miedemar playing in the holding midfield role, because that's your option, I think you have to think it's not about the players on the pitch. It's not really about the manager at the moment. Nick Cushing has nothing to do with the recruitment. But I think as a club, as a whole, if you're thinking about wanting to compete long-term for trophies, and you have to look at their history. They've won 1 WSL title. That's not really good enough for a team of Manchester City's quality. And I think it's because they're not doing enough behind the scenes to get the right amount of players, amount of top quality players through the door.
Yeah, but I want to say hats off to Chelsea for really shifting things around in the second half. I don't know what was said at halftime, but it obviously worked, and I just think they really took the game by the scruff of the neck. They were getting much more joy down the wings, down the flanks. Johanna Reithen-Kannerud could have had a couple of goals herself. They were really penetrating City's box a lot. Kiara Keating pulling off some really good saves. And they kind of felt like they were running that back line a little bit left and right and ragged. So I thought, you know, that kind of performance from them in the second half, particularly against the same opposition, will give them confidence going in to next weekend. Because when we come to talk about the Champions League, I want to give City the credit for how they went about winning it.
Can we talk about the timings of the goals again, just to bring it up? Like, it's another point. They scored in the 49th minute and they scored in the 91st minute. That's 2 times where you, as a, you know, you're the most vulnerable, I think, when you come out at half time, and you have to keep it tight for that first bit. And Chelsea just have this utter relentlessness about them that they can come out in those moments and really just hit you for 6 and take control. It
is worth as well mentioning the potential second goal that Manchester City could have had, with the referee pulling it back and not playing advantage. And I think Nick Cushing said after the game, the referees acknowledged that they'd made a mistake there. So that would be really frustrating. I think they were extra frustrated because less than 10 minutes previously, a kind of similar situation had happened where, was it Jess Park maybe, who was fouled? Laura Coombs was fouled kind of on the halfway line, and Jill Road was away up the pitch with the ball, and the ref blew the whistle and brought it back. So they were already kind of angered by a lack of advantage. And, you know, the analysis said at halftime, there had been no advantage, so she made the right call. You didn't even play advantage, so you can't say there was no advantage because it wasn't even time to assess if there was advantage, and it was still in City's possession. So for it to, you know, that was a situation there where you needed an extra second before the decision was made. And what's more frustrating is she did kick the ball and then the whistle blew, but because the ref had already made the decision. So I can understand that frustration. It would have been a very different game going in 2-0 up. it could have shifted things slightly. So I can understand that frustration. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I can too. I think it's a really hard one. I think advantage in football has been coming into it more often in recent years, like as a thing. We never used to really see advantage played in football way back when I was younger.
Okay.
Way back in the olden days. Whereas like we know it like from rugby where they play extended advantage times. But I think in terms of refereeing, they just need to be a bit more patient with it, because you can always pull it back. Like within the next phase of the game, you can always pull it back if you need to be.
And I think if you just
need to stop being so instinctive.
If you've made a wrong decision on advantage 10 minutes earlier, it's almost recognizing, okay, I need to give myself a second.
But once she's blown the whistle, she can't change her mind. That's the problem. So that was the problem in that situation.
Okay, we're going to move on to the game. You were at Leicester 3, Brighton 2. Looked like Brighton were absolutely down and out in this game. Leicester were running away with it, and then we thought maybe the comeback of all comebacks was on. Leicester did not appreciate, guys, being dragged into the relegation conversation. Thank you very much. So they absolutely showed up and showed everyone, don't you dare bring us down there. You're still in the same position, Leicester, but they have managed to put some space.
6 points now between them and Palace, which, I mean, when I interviewed Ormondine after the game, she was like, well, that can change to 3 next weekend. She's always like that when I ask her these questions.
She also breaks the fourth wall. When you're doing the interview, if you watch the interviews back, she's always doing a little bit of this while you're interviewing. And she's meant to be talking to you, but actually she's doing the fourth wall, and it's very Fleabag.
But yes, no, she was like, well, it can change next weekend. But for now, they've got that nice cushion, and it's really helpful for them. That first half from them was probably the best first half of football they've played, in terms of, I guess, what she wants to be doing with this team. There's something like 33% possession, but they created like 15 chances.
How efficient, yeah.
And they were super
Same at West Ham.
Yeah.
They were down in the 30s in possession, but efficient.
And it could have been more at the break. They were so like resilient in defence, which is what they've been all season. Sophie Howard is superb at the heart of defence, just standing in, stepping in, breaking up any kind of Brighton attack, giving them no space at all to work in. And then Takarado was playing in the 10 yesterday. She was really, really dogged, and like that press was just on it. And Sam Tierney as well. They were just winning the ball back, winning turnovers. And then every time they won a turnover, either Shaw's not on the left or Hannah Kane on the right were just free and acres of space to run into. And that's where the 3 goals came from, kind of Hannah Kane bombing down the right side, just in so much space to put in delivery. Not for the first one, her shot was blocked for the first one to set up Shannon O'Brien, but for the other 2, her deliveries from those right sides, that right side was kind of key. And Brighton kind of changed things a bit at half time, but it wasn't really, and yes, Madison Haley got them back into the game, but it wasn't really until Yuka Mimiki missed a penalty that you started to feel, and the penalty for Brighton came literally 90 seconds later, and they scored it, and that's when you're like, oh, this is going to be a rough 10 minutes. And
was it Sam Tierney or Shannon O'Brien? I can't remember which player it was, but it was a Leicester player. They had a video of her in the last kind of injury time, sitting on the steps with a head in her hands, fingers crossed, like waiting for the final whistle to go. And then it went
was really tense.
Yeah,
because then they added 9 minutes of extra time on. You were just like, oh my god, this is not going to go well. But I think what they can take from it is that they did hold on. They had the opportunity to send it to 4-1, and that would have been a lot more easier for them. But that kind of character to dig in and be resilient. And yes, they were under pressure, but at the end of the day, they got the 3 points.
What I love about Brighton is that they did so well the first half of the season that even though they've only won 1 game in 2025, they're still 5th. So I don't know how they're still hanging on to 5th.
Their away form is crazy. They're unbeaten at home.
Yeah.
But away from home, they really, really struggle. And I know they beat Spurs last week away from home.
Not just actually, they deserve to win that.
But other than that, it's been really, really sketchy on the road. And I wonder what the reason is for that as well. I do think...
time difference.
Yeah,
when you leave the south of England.
That's why.
Time difference. Killer.
The south coast.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your reason.
Yeah. No sea air. Okay, that was an interesting one. Then we had the final game of the weekend was Aston Villa 0, Manchester United 4. Comfortable performance for Manchester United, something they would have needed after losing to Liverpool last week. And they maintain their charge for a Champions League spot, same number of points as Arsenal, but sitting in 3rd. So they would have really needed that. Especially they've got a tough run at the end of the season, so it's important that they're picking up points where they expect to pick up points. Villa absolutely at sea at the moment, struggling to show any kind of real identity. Players they would normally rely on just don't appear to be in form or don't seem to have the confidence. They created 3 shots on target from 11. So they were creating opportunities, but they're just not efficient enough or quality enough. There's just, and look, it's hard, I think, for the new manager because they've had so much up and down this season. They haven't had consistency. And even when they were playing well, they were losing. Do you know that kind of way? During the beginning of the season. So I feel for her. I think that Natalia speaks really well. She said, I'm just as scared as the players, which is quite sweet. But, she said something about they're all in the same boat, but they need to pull harder, stronger and faster. So, for somebody who doesn't speak English as a first language, she comes out with some lovely
She's
lines.
She's a former journalist, so
you can tell.
I think it's a problem in that I don't think the club, the players, or Natalia expected to be in a relegation battle at this point. I think they probably thought when she came in over the winter break is that they had enough about them, they were pretty safe, and that she'd have 6 months where she could literally just start instilling her kind of style and philosophy of football. And instead she's found herself in a dogfight which requires a different kind of management. You have to just dig in and get things over the line. And you look at their squad and you go, they have to have the quality to stay up here, but they're just not performing. I think they've got a nice couple of games coming up. They've got Liverpool. I know Liverpool have done well recently, but you've got to look at that game and go, look at what happened at the weekend as well, and go, there's something to be got there. And then you've got Tottenham, who, in current form, they have to kind of beat. Yeah. They have to get that 3 points. Those are two biggies. I think the Man United game, they would have wanted to get something out of it. Every game is a cup final at this point, but especially with Palace losing to Everton, it maybe takes that kind of level off a little bit, but it's still a really disappointing performance. I think in terms of United, you've introduced me to this Twitter account, which I love, the WSL Analytics Twitter account. Go and check it out. But yeah, for Turland, just emphasising the clinicalness of Elizabeth Turland. She completed just 8 passes, the fewest of any player with 35 plus minutes, 7 times fewer than the match leader, Mia Letizier, who had 53. But it doesn't matter because she led the match in goals 2, shots 5, shots on target 5, and touches in the opposition box, which were 7. So that just shows her clinical ability of knowing where to be at the right time.
That was what I flagged about her when she joined Manchester United, and I said it was something I thought Manchester United were missing, was a clinical, efficient striker who
number 9,
who could turn not great opportunities into opportunities, and that's an example of what she can do. So great for her to be back for them as well.
I think she struggled at the beginning of the season just trying to adjust, but I think now she's kind of really found her home and she understands. She's got that relationship with Bizet on the right, and Galton on
who's
the left.
Hopefully okay. She had to come off. She's folded in half on the pitch. Jesus.
But I think it's kind of she's sort of really hit that kind of sweet spot at the moment.
Okay, well, it means that the table looks like this. Chelsea are on top on 47 points. Arsenal in second on goal difference on 39 points, same as Manchester United, with City in 4th on 32 points. So quite a gap now between 4th and 3rd. So it's going to be a tough job for Manchester City to claw their way back into Champions League contention. But that is absolutely the goal, Nick Cushing has said. No movement for Palace and Villa. They stay in 12th and 11th respectively. But Leicester, as I said, have pulled themselves away a bit from both. They're still in 10th, but on 15 points. 5 points above Leicester. Okay. Player of the week, please, Sophie. Oh, gosh, I didn't see that coming.
I didn't actually.
It says it in the running order. I warned you before.
You write the running order and I don't read it. I am going to go for... Oh, this is tricky. I'm going to go for Mariona Caldente, I think.
Okay.
Because I think she's being asked to do a lot of different things in that Arsenal team at the moment. She played out of on the left against Real Madrid and didn't work too well. But then the whole team didn't really work too well against Real Madrid. So, but I think on Saturday, she was asked to play a slightly deeper role, more defensive role. That probably she's not played very often, I guess, in her career. And she performed it. She got her goal, a beautiful goal at that. But she just is so involved in that, everything that Arsenal do. And she's so just so present in terms of their attacking statistics and all of that. So I'm going to go with her.
Okay, moving then on to Sophie's spotlight moment.
I was going to go with the marriage proposal because that doesn't happen every day. But I think I will go with Aggie Beever-Jones's goal because I thought it was just a pure illustration of what Chelsea can do at their very best. Kind of intensity of their attack going from one end of the field to the other, the ball in from JRK from the right, and then I think the touch on the 1 foot from Aggie and then the finish on the other was just sublime, and it shows exactly what she's about as a striker.
Okay, love that. Team of the week?
Team of the week. So, yes, Kiara Keating, as you mentioned before, in goal. I've got Jade Riviere of Manchester United on the right-back role. Leah Williamson, centre-back for Arsenal, alongside Sophie Howard for Leicester. Sarah Holmgaard at left-back. In the centre midfield, the holding role, I've got Katrina Gorey. As you said, she performed brilliantly for West Ham. Mariona Caldente in the 8. Saori Takarada in the 10. As they played at the weekend. So I've stuck with their positions. Then I've got Carolyn on the right. I was umming and ahhing with Carolyn about her and Hannah Kane because Hannah Kane had a really, really good game for Leicester. So she was very close second.
Okay.
Elizabeth Turland up front with her clinicalness, and then Lauren James out on the left, who was superb, I think, both offensively and defensively for Chelsea. She's so improved that side of her game. And there is a lovely clip of her on social media, go and find it, of her gliding across the field like the ball is stuck to her foot, making it look so easy, and then she just sort of turns into Kasparov and away from her, and just it looks like there's no effort involved whatsoever. It's just exquisite football.
Love that. Yes, of course, shout out to Keating. I thought she did really well, coming in, having not played in a little while, and coming in a big game and putting in a performance like that was super impressive. So very much deserved as in the team of the week. Do let us know who you would have in your team of the week, who stood out for you. Always love to hear from you. Okay, Barclays Championship very quickly. Blackburn 1, Bristol City 1, Southampton 0, Portsmouth 0, Charlton 1, Birmingham 1, London City Lionesses 4, Sheffield 0, Newcastle 1, Sunderland 0. So the table looks like this. Birmingham stay on top with 36 points. London City in second on 35 points, but they have a game in hand. Charlton stay in third on 30 points, with Durham in fourth on 29. Down the bottom now, it is Sheffield who are propping up the table, with Portsmouth picking up more points. Sheffield are in 11th on 6, Blackburn above on 8, and Pompey in 9th on 9 points. So they picking up points along the way, very important points along the way. So
yeah, definitely. Those two points for Blackburn and Portsmouth this weekend were really, really important. I know Sheffield have a game in hand. But now it's 3 points between them and Portsmouth. So the gap is opening up a little bit. It's sort of turned around in the last 2 weeks. So it's going to be a really exciting end to the season.
Okay, we're going to talk Champions League now because I think both games produced some really interesting results. This feels like we're going a bit arse over tit because we're going back to round 2 of Manchester City versus Chelsea. But we'll start with Real Madrid 2, Arsenal 0. Arsenal not good enough in this game. It was sloppy, struggled to string passes together, take advantage. I do think the pitch played a part. I think it was very much who was going to adapt quickest. And I think Real Madrid very much adapted quicker. But saw some reporting about how the pitch deteriorated during the match. The pitch wasn't good enough at the beginning of the game. We are let in only an hour before kickoff, which is ridiculous. It's already not a suitable enough pitch to be hosting Champions League games, but getting in an hour before kickoff for media is just not enough time. But they were using leaf blowers at that stage to try and remove standing water.
I don't know how it passed the pitch inspection. I honestly don't. I think I've seen worse pitches in lower league games be called off for a lot. No, not worse pitches. Start that one again. I've seen the pitches in lower league games be called off for a lot less water on the pitch. It was standing water. It wasn't safe, and I think that's the main thing. And I think two things can be true. Arsenal were not good enough to win the game. There were many reasons for that. One reason would be the pitch, because they didn't adapt well to it, not because it caused them to lose the game. But then also the pitch was not up to standard. And I think real questions have to be asked to Real Madrid about why they wouldn't allow the team to use Bernabeu that's standing empty this week. It has a roof. Pretty sure it has a bit where the pitch can disappear into in the floor.
Fancy.
It's empty this week because of men's international break. There is literally no excuse. And I think if you market it properly, we've seen across the league this week, right? If you market
Don't ruin anything. Don't ruin any spoilers.
No, I'm not. But if you market things properly, and I'm going to say the one that's not on your spoilers, but like even like in the National League this week, 10,000 in Portman Road for Ipswich, Ed Sheeran dancing with the Ipswich team, very cool. But yeah, side point. You know, you market it properly, you get people in for the big game, you'll get a crowd. But no matter about the crowd, it doesn't really matter about the numbers of spectators you're getting in. It's about the safety of these players and the quality of conditions for these players. And the Stadio Alfredo Di Stefano, is that the right way around?
I don't care. It's Alfredo Di Stefano, something or other.
It's not a suitable venue for elite football. No. And I had people throw it at me that it was used during COVID times for the men's game. Yes, it was. But that was very, very... The context of those games was very, very different in terms of like spectators and stuff. And it was because... I think it was because the Bernabeu was being redone or something. But also, for whatever reason, the context is wrong, but it's not suitable to host elite football.
Just because it was a shit decision then doesn't make it okay for now. Yeah, I always find those things, well, yeah, but when this happened, that happened. And you're like, okay, cool. So that was also wrong. It doesn't mean that like it's acceptable now because it's just women. Yeah, it's not a great pitch. I got absolutely soaked. And frustratingly, there's never really anywhere to go at half time for us.
They don't have the media facilities.
No, we're just stuck. Photographers are stuck outside. Just getting soaked.
Remember the first time we went, we've been way too many times. The first time we went, there was no like toilet paper in the toilets. You know, it was just not serviced for hosting games.
How's there no toilet paper? Like,
I don't know.
You know people are coming. It's so stupid.
And I mean, is this going to sound really like, I don't know, as media, the least you expect.
There's a minimum.
The least you expect is a bottle of water, and there was literally no sustenance whatsoever.
Or even like as photographers, someone to go and edit your photos. Yeah. It's when it's chucking it down rain, it's very difficult to edit photos on your laptop and stuff at halftime. Anyway, besides the point, the football. You were right. I think Real Madrid very much adapted to the situation quicker than Arsenal did. I think they recognised that Arsenal were struggling, so they just kind of sat back and let them and kind of waited for their opportunities. You know, I thought we spoke about Russo and Blackstenius starting. We could both see what the goal of that was, but it didn't work, and you then kind of lost the potency of Russo up front.
Yeah, it was. You could see why she was choosing to do it. I think there were reasons. Obviously, breaking through Real Madrid's line with the direct running of that Blackstenius has. You can understand the decision making, but also I don't understand the decision making because Russo is the most potent striker at Arsenal at the moment. And she can run between the lines. It's not like she can't do that. She's not just that kind of player who drops deep and influences play. So she has that ability to. And I just think you're messing with the front line too much. And I think Russo performs at her best in that number 9 position. It just kind of really disrupted the flow of their attack, I think. I think Arsenal weren't at the races. You were right. Real Madrid just sat there waiting to pick them off on the transition. I think Arsenal went too gung-ho after conceding. I think they could have maybe been a bit more astute about their defensive qualities so that they didn't go back home with 2-0 loss instead of... so they could take a 1-0 loss home rather than 2-0 loss because it makes that mountain a bit more steeper. But yes, it's all to play for in the second leg, and the Emirates pitch is going to be difference as well.
This is what I was going to ask you. Like, I feel like what Arsenal needed between that Real Madrid performance and the next was a game where they played at home and they scored a lot of goals and created plenty of opportunities, and that's exactly what happened at the weekend. So
did Barcelona. It's not Barcelona.
Real Madrid.
So did Real Madrid against Barcelona.
Maybe they'll still have their heads in the clouds.
Beating Barcelona for their first time in their history. So
in controversial fashion.
It'll be like buoyant.
Yes, yes, they will. But I do think, should Arsenal get an early goal, obviously I think that's key for this tie. We've seen them do it before, I think against Wolfsburg, where they brought it back and it ended up going to extra time and they still lost it. But I do think, an early goal is key.
It's possible.
It's doable. Yeah,
and I think
it's not easy.
Champions League nights at the Emirates always have something special under the lights, and that could be an added. And I think I saw today over 20,000 tickets sold.
Cool.
So it's going to be a big night.
Brilliant. Okay, Manchester City versus Chelsea, part 2. So we're going backwards slightly. I really enjoyed this game. I was really impressed with City. And I think understandably a lot of the coverage was how Chelsea lost, first time they've lost, etc., etc. But actually, I want to credit City with they won this game and they won it cleverly. I think tactically they got it right. I think you know, it must be a Nick Cushing thing, their willingness to not kind of stick to plan A and only plan A. And I think when I saw Bunny Shaw and Fagino were both injured, I kind of thought Chelsea had it in the bag, I won't lie, especially with Miedema on the bench. I thought, you know, this is going to be a really difficult night for them. And actually, I thought they did extremely well in the first half. I think, you know, some of the younger defenders as well, particularly playing well. Carolyn was superb. And I know Nick Cushing spoke about how annoyed Miedema was that she wasn't starting. And I understand. I kind of probably expected her to play 60 minutes as opposed to not the first half. But actually, it worked exactly how they planned, or what they got exactly what they wanted from it, because she's such an intelligent player that she could see the spaces and the gaps that she could be occupying, the places to exploit Chelsea. She spoke about this post-match, actually, that she was able to come on and then execute. And boy, did she execute. It was a Miedema masterclass, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the problem with City at the moment, is that, you know, they are having to rest key players. And Viv Miedema, I think actually it really speaks to Nick Cushing as a coach, the fact that he rested her, because I think many a coach would persist with just putting the load on her, because especially when Bunny Shaw and Fagino are absent and there's no Lauren Hemp, she is your world-class player in that attack, and she will change a game. And she's your biggest threat and biggest outlet. But it was quite a brave decision to go, no, we need to look after her a bit, give her, you know, a bit of time on the bench, even if it's just 45 minutes, bring her on fresh for the second half and just let her go and do what she can do. And I think she kind of, in that 45 minutes, gave us a vintage Miedema performance in terms of the way that she attacked Chelsea. They switched to a 4-4-2, which I thought was really decisive. I think that was the difference as well from the cup game the week before. Sonia Bonpastor in the cup game was really decisive at the right times. She didn't make the right decisions on Wednesday night, and Nick Cushing did. And I think he changed the game with those decisions. And Viv was just special. And the two goals aren't even my favourite moment of the night. My favourite moment of the night.
Yeah, I missed this. Can someone clip this up, please?
Yes, I'd love to see this clip. It was actually ended up in offside, which is unfortunate. But there was a moment when they were 1-0 up and they were countering, and the ball came in from the right as Viv was speeding up the pitch. And the ball was behind her. She was ahead of it. She stuck out her leg, heeled it over her head, then took a touch to bring it down into her path and just kept running towards the goal. And it was just the most delightful piece of football, just exactly what Viv Miedema was about, kind of that skill set. Gave me a lot of joy.
Well, yeah, so super impressed at Manchester City. It reminded us a little bit of the kind of Barcelona game where, you know, they didn't have the majority of possession, which you're not really used to saying when you're talking about Manchester City, but I'm just being really impressed with their adaptability and how they've managed with the injuries that they've had. And I know I've touched on it. Hopefully Alexandri and Hasegawa are okay for this game, because it could get even more difficult for them. Hopefully they are available for round 4 at Stamford Bridge. And this could be interesting because Chelsea, I don't think, played very well in that game. I think some of that is down to them. Some of that is also down to how City set up. But I think, like Arsenal, what they needed against Manchester City, obviously, at the weekend was that second half performance that they had, in terms of buoying them and giving them confidence and attacking with intent and looking super dangerous. They'll want to have scored more. And I think same for Arsenal, that was what they needed before this next game. So it could make Stamford Bridge really interesting. But you were saying you feel like this mountain for Chelsea is harder to climb. Like, this 2-0 deficit seems harder than Arsenal's 2-0 deficit.
So they're both difficult, don't get me wrong. I'm not making light of Arsenal's challenge ahead. But it did feel like when the final whistle blew on Wednesday night after this game, the City-Chelsea game, I turned to you and I said, I think this one feels heavier than last night's, just for some reason. And I might be proved completely wrong, but it just feels that, you know, every game between them at the moment has been super tight and super, like, there's been chances at both ends. City have had chances to score. Chelsea have had chances to score. And there's really not that much between them. So the idea of them having to go and get 3 goals at Stamford Bridge and not concede any is a challenge for them. It's a big mountain. I think when you look at Arsenal and maybe the conditions and maybe the fact that, you know, Real Madrid are not always the most consistent of teams. You think if they get an early goal, they're really, really in it. It just feels a bit harder for Chelsea, but that's not to say they can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's going to be easy for Arsenal either.
No.
It's just a feeling.
It's exciting.
It's just a feeling, a gut instinct that I have that this one's more. And I would have thought they would have reined it in a bit and tried not to concede rather than going all out for that second goal, for that equaliser. Sorry.
Well, we shall see. I'm very excited about both of those games. I think they're super tasty, and whatever happens, there's going to be an English team in the semi-finals, which is great. Okay, we were going to discuss this new World 7 League thingy, but I think because this episode is so chunky already, we're going to do that separately and maybe release it later in the week. Talk about what it is, what we know so far, which isn't loads because I don't think it's all been entirely fleshed out, but a bit of a chat about what it is, what it could look like, and some of the pros and cons and what we think about it. So if you do have any questions or anything like that about it, can't guarantee we'll have the answers, or maybe some inputs yourself, drop them in the comments and we can try and feed them into the episode that we do. Okay, some of our any other business. Newcastle smashing the championship record with their win over Sunderland in front of 38,502, which is superb, amazing crowd, and proof that it can be done with the right marketing and the right kind of impetus behind the club. They can get those numbers in. They are there. People are interested. Also, congratulations to Nottingham Forest, who won the National League Cup final 3-1 over Stoke City, their second time in 3 years. Which is brilliant.
Promotion as well to the championship. Yeah. So.
And finally, Bournemouth, congratulations on sealing promotion to Tier 3. They beat Bristol Rovers 2-0 to confirm that promotion with 4 games to go. They've won all 18 games so far this season.
They're unbeaten in 2 seasons in the league.
They've scored 82 goals and they've conceded just 3, which is crazy. And in front of a record crowd of over 7,000. So right through the tiers at the moment, there's
really
been some great
special
crowds.
Day at the Vitality Stadium, I think, to get that. They lifted the trophy there as well. Which you don't always see with 4 games to go.
No, you don't.
I think it was a special, if they got it done, that was the way you want to lift the trophy, right?
Yeah, in front of that many as well.
In front of that kind of crowd. And yeah, a really special weekend. I mentioned Ipswich earlier. They got 10,000 at Portman Road, which was equally special. I think it goes to show that, as you say, market the game right, do it right, put the right energy behind it, right impetus behind it, and people will come. It's not that people don't want to come. They probably just haven't had their eyes open to it yet.
Yeah. Okay, so this week we will be covering Arsenal versus Real Madrid, Chelsea versus Manchester City. Then I'm doing Brighton versus Manchester City, and you are doing Palace versus Arsenal. You're obsessed with Palace at the moment. This seems to be the games we keep ending up at.
I wonder if the Eagle will be there this time. I don't know.
Make sure you're following us across all of our social media platforms for all of that coverage. We will do a live.
The breaking news.
Forgot the breaking news. I'm so sorry, which is terrible on my part because it is about Ireland. Yes, Ireland have just announced that they will be playing a doubleheader against the USA in Colorado and Cincinnati during the summer. So Carla and Emma Hayes will be reuniting on the touchline at least. So that will be
really important for Ireland, I think, to get that fixture, because there is always a danger when you get stuck in League B, even if you're stuck in League B just for 4 months or whatever it might be,
if we're lucky.
If you're lucky, to continue playing top opposition, because the only way you're going to improve is playing the top nations in the world. The USA's, the England's, the France's of the world, and you learn so much from those games. So for them to get those 2 headers, that double header in the bag is going to be really such an experience as well, to go away for a double header as well.
They'll learn a lot, that's for sure. We will do a live on Saturday, I promise. We didn't do it this week, I think for the first time in a while. Our schedules just didn't allow for it. You were up in Everton doing the game, and then your train got delayed on the way home, so you were home quite late, so it just was not really feasible for us to do it. And then we were both gone early for our matches the following day. So we will do it next week, so do get us in any questions or thoughts ahead of that if you want us to chat about them, or join us and send them in live, because we always love to hear from you. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll speak to you again very soon.